Hey everybody, Mo here, and today I'm bringing you guys a deck guide, kind of. It's mostly just going over the deck, so it's the deck tech of the Misfortune Aurora deck. Tomorrow we'll be going over the VOD review of the player that got top 16 with Misfortune Aurora at the most recent Chinese Open, the first ever big Riot official tournament. It was 506 players, and there were quite a few Misfortunes that made day 2. I believe there is one that made, or quite a few, I think. Actually don't remember the number off the top of my head of how many made day 2, but I know at least 2. I know one made top 32 and then one made top 16. And before this, Prismat made it in A, made it all the way to top 4 in one of the meta Riftbound weekly tournaments. So it's really the only success it's had in A so far. And in the first major, it had, pretty decent performance. But I think this is one of the strongest decks in the entire game. This is something I've been saying for a very long time, and it's something that I think is really being held back by two things. One, being not played as often. I think a lot of decks are being held back by not being played as often. People aren't playing as many new decks, or they're experimenting and all this type of stuff. Two, people are extremely results-based oriented for some reason. They think if deck do not win tournament, then deck equal bad, which is really funny because I'm pretty sure Kaisa has only won one tournament in A so far, like the TTS tournaments, but people saw Kaisa win one tournament and then went, wow, Kaisa good. Same with Victor. Victor has won a couple of tournaments, but the conversion rate on Victor is horrible. It had an 8% conversion rate at the Chinese Open. It was the second most brought deck with over 100 copies. And there were 8 total that made it into day 2 and only 1 that made it into top 8. So, I don't know why people are like that, but that's a reason. 2, this deck does have a really bad Victor matchup. With that being said, with saying Victor is not very good, I think it's a fraud deck, I will say it beats Misfortune very hard. So because people are playing a lot of Victor, it's hard to play Misfortune. But that is just about the only truly bad matchup that Misfortune has that I've come across and seen so far. And literally every single Misfortune that I've seen do well in a tournament gets stopped by a Victor, or they don't make day 2 because of a Victor. And that's just about it. That's the only thing that stops her. So I would not play her in a tournament right now if you expect a lot of Victor, but she's really good for if you do get past day 1, maybe you only hit 1 Victor in day 1 or something and you made it into day 2. Fun fact, in day 2 there's going to be not very many Victors at all, so you should have a fairly good tournament. Just be on the opposite side of the Victor player, obviously, and let them lose, because that's what Victor will do. So that's enough yapping. Quick thing before we get into the deck guide. This is a couple things to remind you. You guys know the deal by now. 1, this is going to be probably a decently long deck tech video. I always guess at least half an hour, around half an hour, sometimes longer, sometimes a little bit shorter, because I'm going to go super in depth in every single card. I'm going to tell you why every card is played, and the purpose of that, even though if you're like, well, obviously you play stack deck to find card, why does it take you, 30 minutes to tell me how an Aurora deck plays? You just find Aurora, lol. It's because I want competitive players to gain as much of an advantage as possible. I want you to be rewarded for spending your time learning Riftbound. I love Riftbound. I love competitive card games. So if you are that dedicated to Riftbound and you want to get the maximum amount of potential for your time and return on your time, I want to be really in depth for that. At the very end of the video, this video is timestamped just like my last deck tech video where I went over Darius Hook. The very end will have a TLDR. If you don't want to listen to all this, you just want to pick the deck up, play it out of weeklies because it looked cool, you think Aurora is a cool card and you haven't seen it do well, or you just think, oh, I've never seen Misfortune, this deck looks kind of sick, I saw it high roll or something, skip to the end. There's a TLDR there on the deck telling you basically how the deck functions and the key points of the cards. And then last thing is I do have a meta fight now, so I will be posting a sideboard guide for this just like I did on the Darius Hook deck. For those of you that might have missed that, the link to my meta fight will be in the description below. And I did an extremely in-depth sideboard guide for Darius Hook. It got almost 100 members in the first 2 days, and I shadow dropped it at 10 p.m. So go check that out. A lot of stuff will be coming on the meta fight soon. Coaching once it comes closer time to the game coming out, as well as a lot of cool stuff. I'm thinking I'm going to post VODs, or sorry, a scrim VODs in there. So I'll be, I scrim with Kuvira, Prism, Presto, a bunch of different players, sometimes in group, sometimes one-on-one. And I'm thinking I'm going to do some of our scrims. I will just record it for you guys so you guys can see what it's like to be in a kind of like a high level scrim scenario, see what the things we talk about. I'll try and keep it as unedited as possible. You know, if not just completely unedited for you guys. So that's something that the lowest tier of the subscribers will be able to get. I think it'll be $5 a month. That will get you access to the at least 1 to 2 of those a week. Once I start doing those, we'll do VOD reviews for subscribers, all that type of fun stuff. So right now everything is free though. The Darius Hook Guide sideboard guide is free. This sideboard guide will be completely free. So if you are interested in free content and just want to see all the content, go follow me on Metafy. It still helps. Join the community, get all the free content. And then if you're interested in supporting more and taking your advantage of learning even further, look into that, subscribe. It's not up yet, but once I figure out my schedule for doing that stuff, I'll put it up. I don't want to just put it up though without having, you know, things scheduled in plan, so I'm not, you know, just robbing you guys for $5. So once I have all that up, cool stuff, I'll make another announcement for that. But yeah, go join that. So that's it for the intro. Let's get into the actual deck guide. So Misfortune is an orange-purple legend, so your deck is orange and purple. How we're going to do it this time, slightly different than the Darius Hook Guide, is I'm going to go over the point of the deck first, and then why the Misfortune legend, like why pick this color for Aurora, and then we will get into every single card. Right? That's what I kind of think will make more sense instead of just explaining things. And then I found in my hook video, I was constantly like, we'll get to that card later, we'll get to that card later. And then like it took too long to even get to the hook card. So we're going to explain what the deck does, why this deck, and then we'll go top down just like we did last time and all that fun stuff. So what is this deck? This deck is a Dazzling Aurora based deck. For those of you that don't know, Dazzling Aurora. Also, again, this is, I'll be saying the name of every card I talk about, so this is something you can put on the side if you're studying, driving, anything like that, you know, doing housework around, and you just need something on in the background. Don't worry, this will be great for that, because I will announce the name of every card I'm talking about. So I'm saying, this card does blah, 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 blah. Okay, the next card, this card does blah, 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 blah. I'll give the actual name. So, this is a Dazzling Aurora deck. What is Dazzling Aurora decks? If you don't know, it is a 9 energy gear that says, at the end of your turn, reveal cards from the top of your main deck until you reveal a unit. Play it, ignoring its cost, and then recycle the rest to the bottom. So what this does is effectively, Dazzling Aurora says, at the end of your turn, you just play a unit for free off the top of your deck. So typically your Dazzling Aurora decks will just be full of really expensive units. So as you see here, our units are a 5-cost Snapvine, a 7-cost Anivia, 7-cost Mind Splitter, 8-cost Gorger, 8-cost Deadbloom Predator. So all of our units are extremely expensive. And once you get to this 9 energy threshold where you get to play the Dazzling Aurora, you play Dazzling Aurora, and then you effectively get a free unit every single turn, which is kind of like drawing an extra card every turn, but it's better because it's drawing and playing the card every turn. So you get a free card every single turn, which is really absurd. The downside to this deck and why you don't see it popping off, if you're sitting there thinking, wow, this card sounds really broken, one, it is. just to clear things up, clearing up any confusion. Aurora is fairly broken. The text is broken. I'm not sure why this card was released in set 1. There's not a lot of good gear removal in set 1 either, so once you play a Dazzling Aurora, unless you're playing against exactly a yellow deck, then there's a good chance it just sticks into play. And because you are in orange and purple, we actually have ways to stop that, but that's something I'll talk about later. So it is broken. So why don't decks play this? What is the downside to playing Aurora? Well, the downside to playing Aurora is your early game is typically very, very weak. Because you are trying to ramp into this 9 energy Dazzling Aurora gear card, you're going to be losing a lot of tempo early most of the time by not playing cheap units, because you don't want to put cheap units in your Dazzling Aurora deck, because you don't want to be spending 9 energy and a bunch of tempo loss to then immediately flip out a 2-cost unit, right? You don't really want to do that. So your deck doesn't have cheap units, which is not good. You're not getting points early, which can be put you behind in the point and tempo race. And then most of the time, you don't have a lot of pressure against your opponent's deck, so you have very limited tools to actually stop them from getting points. So those are all fairly downsides. If you're against very aggressive decks, very swarmy style decks that can put out multiple units in a turn, so really max out on points, it can be kind of a rough time for you. And then obviously your Victor Match is very, very bad because it does all the stuff I just named, but then it also runs this yellow card called Cull, which is a 2 energy, 1 power spell that is just on your opponent's turn, but it effectively just says each player kills one of their own units. So what it does, and you can kill a unit in your battlefield, or sorry, in your base, which is not good for you, because what you do is you end up wasting, 2 to 3 turns, usually 2 turns, not developing anything, ramping, doing a bunch of stuff, getting behind on points, and in turn 3 you finally play a really big unit, whether it's off of your Aurora or you just played a really big unit out of your hand, and then your opponent just spends 2 energy and kills one of their tokens to kill your 7 energy Mind Splitter you just played, or 8 energy, Dead Bloom you just played, and it puts you even further behind and makes it really hard to get back into the game. So that's the main reason why this deck is not picking up in popularity or being played a whole lot, is because the Victor matchup is very, very bad. But hopefully, again, Victor matchup goes away and the deck will perform well. Or even if you can figure out the Victor matchup, which that's what I'm trying to do right now, is teching a whole lot for this Victor matchup, which we'll get into that. I think you can make it not super duper bad and playable, and then just have a very solid deck. So that's your game plan. And they're saying, well, it sounds bad. What are the pros to playing this deck? The pros are you are the best late game deck in the game. Once you put Dazzling Aurora into play, typically on turn 3 is when you can do it in this deck. Turn 4 is average. Turn 3 is average. Turn 4 is like, if you didn't have it on turn 3, you will have it on turn 4 for sure. So I guess you could say turn 4 is more average than the average turn 3. You have very good odds of having it by turn 3. I think it's like close to 80% odds. The only thing you need is to have a catalyst, essentially, like 1 to 2 ramp spells to actually play it on turn 3. But you will almost always have it in your hand by turn 3, which is why you're always allowed to play it on turn 4. So that is the upside, is once you play the Dazzling Aurora, you will run away with the game in about 2 turns. After 2 turns of value from Dazzling Aurora, it is going to be extremely hard for your opponent to keep up with that value. No deck can really keep up with that value, so most of the game plans that beat Aurora revolve around just scoring points too fast, so that way by the time you do get your Aurora in play, you're fighting like 0 to 6 points, and your opponent just has to get 2 more points to win the game. Or the game plan into Dazzling Aurora is to just kill your units, and like maybe they can't be super fast, but if they can stop you from attacking them, so get rid of your units on site with things like Cold, the Hidden Blades, anything like that, or just removing the Aurora if you're in yellow already, is a good way to stop that game plan. And the other pros are Aurora beats every good deck in the game right now, again, outside of Victor because it's very popular. But as far as the good decks go, you're beating Set because you are just a bigger late game mid-range deck than Set. They have to draw Salvage to kill your Aurora. If they don't, you just win. Even if they do, your units are a lot better than theirs, and you play a lot of anti-disruption in the late game, so Salvage is not as scary as you think it is. Against Kai'Sa, that matchup is Kai'Sa's worst matchup by far, is Misfortune Aurora. Kai'Sa in general just cannot stop this Dazzling Aurora card. They have 0 cards in their decks and sideboards to deal with Dazzling Aurora. They have 1 total card in their entire card pool of blue and red that even can kill Aurora, and it's a 5 energy slow speed gear that nobody is playing in their sideboard because Dazzling Aurora isn't really played right now, so it's not something people have to look out for. And if that's what you're doing for your whole turn, it feels extremely bad, to try and have that card in your sideboard in your deck and to effectively be minus like 2 sideboard slots against every deck that isn't exactly Misfortune Aurora, which is not a popular deck right now. So most people opt to not play it. Your Master Yi matchup is fairly good because as Master Yi is an aggro deck in the sense of it can get points early and hold the points. What you do with Dazzling Aurora, though, is Master Yi is also a region that cannot actually kill the Dazzling Aurora. Their best chance is to sabotage it out of your hand before you can play it. But if they don't do that, then once a Dazzling Aurora comes into play, they can't do anything about it. Green cards do absolutely nothing into your Dazzling Aurora units because most of the green cards are going to be things like Charm. They're not going to want to charm your Anivia onto their board. The other things that green cards do is like pump spells. They give their units +2, at action speed, but you don't care because your units are so big, or most of the time you're attacking with multiple units, that +2 is not going to matter. Dragon is really clunky and not very helpful for them. Their Snapvines in their deck are not very good because you either don't have units on battlefields or your unit is so big that the Snapvine doesn't matter because it's just going to kill itself onto your unit. And yeah, they're not actually fast enough to go underneath your Aurora coming into play and just running away with the game as well. Again, Set, you're bigger. Kai'Sa, you're bigger. Darius Hook is around 50-50. The thing with Darius Hook is you have a really solid sideboard plan into them, and they are also a deck that can be super aggressive and super fast, but if they don't open well, like if they don't open with double 2-drop or like a way to make tokens or a way to get multiple points really early. Or if you disrupt them one time, you're usually slamming down your Aurora and getting too far ahead of that. Their game plan at that point, and you will also just run away with the game because they don't have a way to keep up with your value at that point without eventually drawing like a grand stratagem and all that fun stuff. So that's the pros to playing Dazzling Aurora. So now we'll get into the actual deck, into like what the cards do, the colors do, why each card is in the deck. We've said why Aurora is in the deck. That is the whole purpose of the deck, right? So we're not going to go over that card, but we'll start top to bottom. Why Misfortune? Because, you know, Dazzling Aurora is an orange card. You can play it in any orange deck. You can play in Volibear and Set. You can play it in Lee Sin or Master Yi if you wanted to. So why Misfortune? A couple of reasons. One, Misfortune is in a Chaos region, so she's the only orange-purple champion, like legend right now, and that gives you access to quite a few good purple cards that actually fix a lot of Aurora's bad matchups, or makes your good matchups even better, makes your bad matchups either not bad at all or a lot less bad because you're playing this purple region. You have a lot better tempo in early game because your cards don't cost power. If you look at what we're playing right now on the screen, and if you're not, I'm going to read it to you. You have Stacked Deck, which is 1 energy, 0 power. Gust, 1 energy, 0 power. Confront, Mobilize, Pack of Wonder, Treasure Trove, Fight or Flight are all 2 energy, 0 power. So none of your cards cost power early. You're never setting yourself back. The only one that could is Bullet Time, but we're never really casting a Bullet Time early. So all of your early game plays are not going to cost energy, which means it's really easy to consistently get to that 9 energy point as soon as you ramp one time or ramp twice if you're playing a Catalyst. And you can get to 9 energy very easy, or you can at the very least get to 7 or 8 energy very easy. So in the games you somehow don't have your Dazzling Aurora, you can sit there and just chain Dead Bloom and Mind Splitters back to back to back because you hit that nice 7 energy, 8 energy threshold. So I'm going to take off my headset because I just realized I'm not even listening to any music. I'm not listening to music. I'm not listening to myself. I don't know why those are on. Yeah, so you just kind of get to play all of the early game disruption and early game interaction without actually having to spend any power and slowing you down. Even in your sideboard, your Flurry of Blades is one of the best early interaction spells that we have in here. And Flurry of Blades is a 1 energy, deal 1 to all units at battlefields, but it, again, doesn't cost a power. You can interact early without costing power, which is something Purple is really good at. Purple also gives you, and this is the biggest thing, it gives you Mind Splitter. Mind Splitter is a 7 energy, 7 might unit with 2 power, and it says, when you play me, choose an opponent. They reveal their hand, choose a card from it, and then they discard that card. What Mind Splitter does is Mind Splitter allows you to have this game plan of not playing Aurora, or it kind of saves your Aurora. Mind Splitter is 2 things. In post-game ones, it is very good anti-sideboard hate. What that means is when people start bringing in their salvages, when people start bringing in their Coals, or if they have Coals in the Victor matchup, when people start bringing in their Thermo Beams or whatever card that they're bringing in to deal with this Aurora matchup, Mind Splitter off of an Aurora is a ginormous tempo swing. Because if you slam down the Aurora, it hits a Mind Splitter off the top. You now have a 7 might body in play. You have full hand knowledge of what they have in their hand, so you know what to play around. And then you also just removed their biggest either threat that stops them from winning the game or applying too much pressure, or you removed their answer to Aurora, whether that was a salvage or whatever card that was going to deal with your Aurora. You just removed it with Mind Splitter, and that is huge. Mind Splitter also is fairly cheap for what it does. It's only 7 energy, which I know 7 energy sounds like a whole lot. In other game turns, 7 energy is effectively a 3-drop. You know, you can play this card on turn 3 going second, turn 3 going first if you ramp. So it's kind of like a 3-drop in this game. It is well statted at being 7 might. Heavy power cost, but again, once you get to effectively 7 energy or 8 energy, everything costs 2 power, but because you get 2 runes a turn, this is that game plan I mentioned on a podcast a few weeks back, I think, or a stream a few weeks back, where because we ramped into 8 really easily, all of our power cards kind of cap out at 8 except for the Aurora, so we can just chain all of our top end together every single turn and not have to worry about mapping our turn sequences and our play patterns like very carefully. So that's what Mind Splitter does for you in the post games, is it stops all your opponent's hate. In game ones and other games like that, it kind of just runs away with the game if you have to play it by just playing it, getting rid of your opponent's threats. Most of the time, there are a lot of dead cards. This is another pro I forgot to mention. There are a lot of dead cards in people's decks against Dazzling Aurora because your game plan is so different than every other deck in the game. So right now, I'm going to be going over all of the top decks right now from tournament meta. So Freak, so this Rift Lab Clash, it was a 4-round Swiss tournament, so these are all the decks that went 4-0. So against Kai'Sa, for example, let's look at Kai'Sa. Let's look at how many dead cards are in this Kai'Sa deck against Dazzling Aurora. Stupefy, not good against Aurora typically. Hexray, useless against Aurora. Ravenbloom Student, not very good against Aurora because you're not using its ability early game to get over any small or mid unit, or in the mid game to trade or get over any mid to, like large size units. Falling Star, because our Dazzling Aurora deck specifically, Retreat is on here also, doesn't really do a whole lot, but it's alright, I guess. Falling Star, because all of our units in the MF Aurora deck, you notice, are actually 7 might or more, outside of the Snapvine, which you take out against Kai'Sa anyways. Falling Star is actually much worse into this Dazzling Aurora deck than the other Dazzling Aurora decks that are playing, 5 might units, 6 might units, like in the Volibear decks. Smoke Screen is very good into us, I will give them that, but then again, Watchful Sentry, not good because we're not killing it early. Lecturing Yordle doesn't particularly matter because we're not trying to attack them in the early to mid game. Void Seeker, not good, all of our units are too big. Singularity, not particularly great because all of our units are, again, so big. Darius is fine as a 7 might attacker. If you go Darius Cleave, that's 10. It will get over any one of our units again already. It being 7 might matches any of our smaller units that we play, so that's fairly good for them. Thousand Tail Watcher is great. Cathian Rain, not good for them because our units are so big that a Cathian Rain effectively just kills 1 unit. Or if our unit happens to be a Deadbloom, our unit has Deflect, so they just can't target Deadbloom with the Zacathian Rain anyways. And then Mundo is actually a fairly decent card into us because it gets big just like we do. So out of all of these cards, I'd say about half of them are just completely useless or not what you want to see. And then when you look at the sideboards, again, the sideboard to this Kai'Sa deck specifically is an Zacathian Rain, an Iron Ballista, Sprite Mother, and Mundo. Zacathian Rain we've established doesn't do anything. Iron Ballista definitely doesn't do anything against us. Sprite Mother is fine in the sense of you're trying to aggro us down, and then Mundo again is fine because it's going to get really big. The thing about Mundo though that is a misconception is Mundo only gets big if you're playing cards. As the Misfortune Aurora deck, the Dazzling Aurora deck, we're not giving the Kai'Sa player a lot of opportunities to play cards. Like they're not going to be cycling the Stupefies, the Hex Rays, the Falling Stars early, the units early are not trading, like all this stuff that would let them actually discard or play the cards to their trash. We don't let them do that because as we established, all those cards are not very good. Darius deck. So let's look at Darius cards that aren't very useful into us. Again, Falling Star, not very useful. Honestly, the Darius deck mostly just plays its own units and does its own thing. The difference is that we're just playing a bigger unit, so they're playing a small side of not trying to interact with us. We're playing the big side of not trying to interact with them. But again, because we can interact with them, we're going to be much better than them. They're not on any amounts of coal in the main deck. They're on 1 in the sideboard, so we're super duper happy about that, right? And the last one we'll look over is Master Yi because it is such a popular deck. Master Yi is a deck where a lot of their cards legitimately do nothing into you, and that is amazing. So Snapvine does nothing into you. First Mate doesn't really do anything into you because they're not doing a whole bunch of crazy like double conquer, kill 2 things tricks. Discipline's not very good because our units are so big. Defy does absolutely nothing against us because anything that you can defy outside of exactly Catalyst is usually going to be an uptrade for us because we are not paying a power cost and you are, and most of the time we're not really doing a whole lot anyways. On Guard, not very useful because our units are so big. Charm, not useful because our units are so big. Pit Rookie, making your unit 1 might bigger is not going to matter because by the time we play units, they're going to be too big. You guys see the pattern here. Blitzcrank, same way. Unyielding Spirit, same way. Our units are just so big that your combat tricks and your units don't matter. So that is... All of that was basically to say that Mind Splitter will look at their hand in game 1, and let's say they have 4 cards in their hand. There's a good chance that like 2 of those cards don't actually do anything against them. They're going to be like a Charm that doesn't do anything, or it's going to be a Hex Ray, which isn't going to do anything against us, right? So we can just let them have the cards that don't do anything, and then take the 1 to 2 actual good real cards in there. Right, so that's what the purple region gets us when we're going against with Misfortune, as well as the Misfortune Legend ability, which some of you might not know what this does. Misfortune Legend ability is simply exhaust Misfortune, give a unit ganking this turn, which means it can move from battlefield to battlefield. This is amazing. This legend ability is really, really good. People look at this and underrate it all the time. They think, oh, just the ganking, how good could that be? It's very good when you're having to stack a battlefield and then you can gank over an 8-might unit, or you can gank over an Anivia, which going to attack for at least 11 because it's going to deal 3 to the unit, and then Anivia herself has 8 might. Obviously, if they have more units there, then Anivia can just clear. But the biggest thing that Misfortune gives you over Volibear, out of everything, on top over the Mind Splitter, over the purple interaction early, the only other Dazzling Aurora deck people are playing really is Volibear. What Misfortune gives you is fixes one of the problems that Volibear has, which is in the late game, after your Aurora is resolved. Let's say you finally conquered and gotten onto a battlefield. The point's probably like, 1 to 5 or 1 to 6 at this point. What Misfortune allows you to do is she allows you to both hold a battlefield and threaten an attack on a battlefield at the same time, which is something that Volibear can't do. And this is something that Volibear really struggles with, because you have to decide, is putting 15 might and trying to hold on a battlefield better than putting a unit in your base off of the Aurora and then saying my 8-might unit can hold by itself, I have to stop them from holding on the other side. Because what happens if your opponent's at 6 might or 6 points or some high number of points and they do have a decent board, is if the Volibear player decides to just play that unit off of the Aurora onto the battlefield they're currently holding, and they have no attackers threatening any amount of pressure, then the then the opponent will just simply go, okay, cool, you can have your 20 power on that battlefield. I'm just going to stack on the opposite battlefield. So now I'm sitting over here developed and I'm all these units on this other battlefield, and you have to show me how you're going to conquer this battlefield before I just win the game off of points, right? And that's oftentimes a question that the Volibear champion is asked and has to say, hey, where is your answer to this? What is your answer to me just stacking? And Misfortune doesn't put you in that, pickle. You can both, hold or attempt to hold for 15, 16 power, 15 or 16 might, but then also have the pressure of saying, hey, don't just super stack a battlefield, because if you do that, I am going to just give a unit ganking and come over for 8. So you better believe that I'm going to do that, and you have to have a way to deal with me attacking for 8 ganking that is face up, and then also potentialing behind that, having some sort of Dead Bloom in my hand, Snapvine in my hand to make the attack even better, situations like that. Also, we are playing Orange Misfortune as our champion, which means that, one, we're not going to be flipping a Misfortune off of an Aurora, which does not feel good, flipping a 5-might unit off of Aurora. And two, it means we can play our accelerated Misfortune at any time to effectively give 2 units ganking in a turn by doing something like moving a unit back off of the battlefield, right? So you're going to exhaust the unit to move it back. Then you play Misfortune accelerated, move Misfortune somewhere. That will then untap the unit or ready the unit that you just moved to your base. Now you you exhaust your Misfortune. I'm trying to use all the proper terms, guys. Give me a break. So now you exhaust your Misfortune Legend to give 1 unit on a battlefield ganking. And now you have 1 unit in your base readied thanks to your Misfortune champion. So you can just attack for 16 over there. And all of that was effectively face up. And your opponent has to play around that on top of all the cards in your hand. So this ability of giving a unit ganking is just absurdly strong for your play style and what the Aurora deck is trying to do, and doesn't put you in the conundrums of, do I hold or do I stay or do I go effectively? Do I have to move to base or do I stay in the battlefield? So that's why we play Misfortune. And also, I told you guys it's going to be long. We're half an hour in and we haven't looked at a single card other than Aurora and Mind Splitter. Rune Split, nothing too fancy here, just 6/6. It's because we use both really well. You play, as you see here on the power distribution, we have 23 body power and then 8 chaos power. What that means is we only use, the chaos power is also including the sideboard card. So we play Rebuke in the sideboard and Misfortune in the sideboard, and then the only main deck chaos power that we use is Mind Splitter and Soul Gorger. So you can up the orange power if you want to. The issue with that is that upping the orange power
can sometimes make it to where you can't play your Mind Splitters, or in the sideboards you can't play Rebukes, you can't play Misfortune on curve when you need to in the game where you bring in the purple Misfortune. I do think you can. Actually, I'm going to change right now because I do think it should be 7-5. I don't think I would ever go 8-4, to be completely honest with you. I think 7-5 is extremely reasonable, meaning 7 body runes, 5 chaos runes. I could be convinced to do 8 body for chaos, and that's just because when you do use your chaos runes, it's extremely late, except for the games where you are bringing in the Misfortune, purple Misfortune as your chosen champion, so you're swapping them out in sideboard games, which is basically just against the Cole decks, like just against the Victor decks. And again, your mind power, so your purple power runes are going to be used extremely late in the game for your 7 energy, your 8 energy cards, and you do need a decent amount of orange energy to be able to do things like Soul Gorger, bring back a Dead Bloom, play your Snapvine into your Anivia, into your Dead Bloom, or play Dead Bloom, and you don't want to get in a spot where you're just looking at, like 1 orange rune in play, and you can't even, you hit your 1 Soul Gorger off of your Dazzling Aurora, and you can't even reanimate something because you don't have the orange rune. I think 7-5 is fine. I can be convinced on 8-4, but I would really have to see the math numbers. So 7-5 on runes. Battlefields, this is the most standard Aurora battlefields you will get. I'll explain why, but they're extremely standard. The first one, or 2 of them are extremely standard. The third one is not standard, basically just for Misfortune. The first one is Aspirant's Climb. This says you increase points needed to win the game by 1. This is the exact opposite of Arena's Grayness, which says each player starts with a point, so instead of playing to 8, you're playing to 7. What Aspirant's Climb does, and says instead of playing to 8, you're playing to 9 points. This is huge. This is huge. This gives you effectively an entire turn most of the time to play the game before you lose, because you're playing to 9. And this favors the slow deck always, or the slower deck. Because if you're an aggro deck, and you are struggling to get to 8 points, or getting to 8 points requires, let's say, 5 turns. Like on average, we'll say it takes 5 turns to get to 8 points. Well, with getting to 9, if it takes you 6 turns, that is a whole extra turn with Aurora. Or that let you stumble for 1 turn early, play your Aurora 1 turn late, and then now you're on the same game plan of having 2 procs of Aurora, flip out 2 units before your opponent would normally win the game. This is huge for us. This is really good for any type of late game deck. Very good for you. The other one that is extremely standard for any Aurora deck that you play is going to be Obelisk of Power. This is, again, a deck that favors 2 types of decks. One is a deck that can abuse 3 energy on turn 1, which is effectively just Victor and a Darius. I think if you're not Victor and you're not Darius, you probably shouldn't be playing Obelisk of Power in your deck. Or decks that are trying to ramp into really big things quickly, which is what Dazzling Aurora is doing. Because it gives you 4 energy when you go second, is we are a go second deck. We will always choose to go second. If you win the die roll, choose to go second, because you will start with 3 mana, you will start with 3 energy on turn 1, going second. Then you will have 5 energy on turn 2. You play a Catalyst or ramp 2 runes somehow. That puts you to 7, and then you untap turn 3 with 9 runes, and then that is how you turn 3 Aurora, which is super common between playing things like Mobilize, the Pack of Wonders, Treasure Trove combo, and of course Catalyst, right? So those are, that's why you want to go second with 3 energy. And then with Obelisk of Power, if you are going second again, you start with 4 energy, which just allows you to immediately play Catalyst of Aeons. This doesn't let you do a turn 2 Aurora unless both players are playing Obelisk of Power. So what Catalyst of Aeons does, what Obelisk of Power does is lets you Catalyst on turn 1. So then you go from 4 energy to 6 energy, or 4 runes to 6 runes. And then you untap, you ready everything, and then you immediately channel to 8 runes. And no, that doesn't let you Dazzling Aurora on turn 2, but what it does let you do is it lets you play your entire deck starting turn 2. You can turn to Mind Splitter them, you can turn to Deadbloom Predator, you can do basically anything you want. You can play a Misfortune on turn 2 if you want to keep your 1 power, so that way you can still Aurora on turn 3. That is the biggest mistake, though, and the biggest thing to watch out for is just simply make sure that you cannot, or make sure that you can still play your Aurora and you do not use too much power by doing things like, turn to a Mind Splitter when you have Aurora in hand, and what you've done now is locked yourself out of Aurora for 2 turns. every time you use 2 runes, it's 2 turns until you can play that Aurora. Because instead of playing it on turn 3 now, and you would have had 10 mana or 10 energy on turn 3, you have only 8 on turn 3. So you have to use 0 power again, or only 1 power on that turn 3 to then play Aurora on turn 4, which instead of playing it on turn 3, it comes down to turn late to turn 4. But if you're not using any power on turn 3, it could be kind of lackluster, which we should have just played something else on that turn 2 and then played Aurora on 3, Mind Splitter on 4. That would have been great. Obviously, there are spots you play Mind Splitter early to try and rip out their removal, all that type of stuff, right? Their sideboard hate. But just keep in mind your energy runes. Try and be on odd energy runes. Odd energy runes are the best for you before you've played your Aurora. After you've played your Aurora, even the energy runes are often the best for you because that's what's letting you play the Deadbloom or get to the Deadbloom Predators and then let you do things like the Challenge, the Deadbloom, the Snapvine, plus something, your Soul Gorgers, all of your really big stuff later on is really good, right? But for the most part, try and stay on an even number of rune count because it will let you play more Auroras in the future if you top deck another Aurora. If you are in a spot to be able to play it, that is good. You want to be on even numbers, right? So that is what Obelisk of Power does. You can turn to a Dazzling Aurora if both you and your opponent flip out Obelisk of Power and you go second. You will start the game with 5 energy, which is an odd number. So you can turn 1 a Catalyst, go to 7 energy, turn 2, untap, channel 2 runes. Now you have 9 runes on turn 2, and you can just turn to a Dazzling Aurora, and your opponent can't stop you, really. Which is something that's kind of absurd to do, but don't plan on that because most people aren't going to be doing that. But Obelisk of Power just ramps you, right? And then the last battlefield, this is the one that is kind of changed out the most. The most common third battlefield for Dazzling Aurora decks is the battlefield that says when you conquer here, you recycle 1 rune, not optional. And that is good for the Aurora decks in theory because you get to do things like if your aggro opponent or mid-range, whoever your opponent is, they're going to want to be conquering 2 battlefields to maximize points. But if they have to conquer that battlefield and recycle a rune, it could mess up a lot of their math. They could get to their late game really slow, or a lot slower now, like a turn slower. And that could mess them up and make it to where they don't want to conquer that battlefield, which if they're not conquering that battlefield for you, they're not getting points, you're going to win anyways. And then also, I've been liking Vilemaw's Lair a lot more because it's also an anti-aggro style of battlefield. It doesn't let your opponent bounce back and forth. It doesn't let your opponent bounce a unit back or pull a unit back after it's conquered to stop from getting blown up by things like our sideboard cards that say like Phaleria Blades, which blows up all battlefields. It makes Snapvine and Deadbloom a lot better because they have to keep the unit there, even if it's just a token or something. They have to keep it there. But the biggest thing is it will mess up a lot of people where they do things like, play a 2-cost unit, conquer the not Vilemaw's battlefield. Like if the other battlefield has a conquer trigger or some reason that they want to conquer it early, they will conquer it. And then when they play a nicer unit like a Kaisa or any other unit with Accelerate to try and get to this Vilemaw or that they want to conquer with, they have to choose Vilemaw because it's the only unconquered battlefield by them, and it gets really awkward. And then Misfortune completely ignores the second part where Vilemaw says, or the first part where it says Vilemaw can't move units from base. Units can't be moved from here to base, basically. Sorry, that was really hard to say. And Misfortune gets around that because you give your units ganking. So instead of having to conquer Vilemaw, move your units back to base, and then move your units up to the other battlefield, which is what Vilemaw stops, Vilemaw or Misfortune just lets you gank directly from Vilemaw's lair to the other battlefield without or basically ignoring the Vilemaw's deck. So this is not a battlefield that affects you, but only affects your opponent, and I really, really like that, and that's why I am playing it in my Misfortune deck. There are a couple other options that are good, but this is the one I've enjoyed the most and has done the best for me. So now we'll go over the cards. Some of them are going to be fairly quick because they're kind of self-explanatory, but I'll tell you, again, the main reason why they're in here and any other little tips or tricks with them, if possible. And then we'll go all the way down to the bottom, and we'll go over the sideboard, and then I'll give, my warning about how, don't put a whole lot of stock into the sideboard because sideboards will change with meta. They will change with your local meta. They will change with, just like a lot of things. The sideboard changes a whole lot. We'll first go around with the chosen champion, the Orange Misfortune. So we are playing 1 Orange Misfortune. That is the only Misfortune we are playing in the main deck. So it will be your chosen champion. Orange Misfortune is really nice. You know, it accelerates. It has ganking itself. The first time you move it, you can ready another unit. So that's what I was talking about by being able to effectively give 2 units like this pseudo ganking, because you give one literal ganking with your Misfortune Legend, and you give the other unit like pseudo ganking by being able to ready it as soon as it comes off the battlefield, and then it can now attack that other battlefield with your ganking unit as well. So it's really nice. Misfortune applies a decent amount of pressure by having accelerate. If you ever need to, you can just simply play her, attack into another unit, or attack into a battlefield to stop your opponent from getting a bunch of crazy value or anything like that. It does cost 2 runes to accelerate her, so she turns into a 6 energy, 2 power, 5 might accelerated unit, which is not great. But because she does only cost 1 power to play what I call play raw, so just play unaccelerated, is if you're ever on an even rune count, you can just play Misfortune for 1 power, and then that's not going to stop you from playing your Aurora because you went from an odd rune count to an even rune count, and that's very good for you. Outside of that, Misfortune just applies a lot of pressure in the mid to late game by being able to play the Misfortune at some point, and then even though your Dazzling Aurora is getting units for you every turn off of the top of your deck, you will inevitably draw units or have units in your hand. So being able to give those units, again, pseudo accelerates by playing them, moving the Misfortune, immediately readying that unit. Like if you have an Anivia in your hand and your opponent's not expecting it, you can play the Anivia, attack with the Misfortune, or move the Misfortune to a battlefield you control if you want to keep it safe, or keep the Misfortune safe, and then you ready the Anivia, attacking with an Anivia, and your opponent is going to have a hard time playing around all of that type of stuff. There are other units you can play alongside this Misfortune to be able to do that, but that's the main purpose of Misfortune. That's why I like her over Purple Misfortune. I did play Purple Misfortune for a long time, mostly because, one, she was so cheap and could be a turn 1 play if you needed her. She also only costs 1 power at all times, so if you're ever on an E rune count, you can just play her and not mess up your Aurora turns. And then 2, the the Purple Misfortune ability that says, obviously you can play her to open battlefield, but the bigger thing is friendly units may be played to open battlefields as well, can really help you stabilize in the late games by, when you get into those turns where you attack into a big battlefield with maybe like a Dead Bloom Predator or some other unit you already had in play, you cleared the battlefield but didn't conquer it, so maybe you guys traded or there was some sort of push that happened, but now the battlefield is open. At the end of your turn, when you flip a unit off of Dazzling Aurora, you can still play that unit to the open battlefield, get your conquer point, and then start trying to hold it and prevent your opponent from just getting it back for free, getting that point. Both are very good. I think Orange Misfortune just ekes out slightly. Purple Misfortune also has one other benefit, which is why it's still on the sideboard, but we'll get to that later. But I think Orange Misfortune is just generally the stronger card and probably is going to be better in more spots than not. Bullet Time. So this was a card that was not played at all, and then it was played some in the sideboard, and then people just started putting it in the main deck because they realized how strong this card is. Bullet Time is 1 energy, 0 power cost, so just 1 energy. And then it says, pay any amount of power, deal that much damage to all enemy units at 1 battlefield. So this is kind of like a 1 energy board wipe in a way, on both defense or offense, because it is action speed. So you can use it while defending, you can use it while trying to conquer as well. And what this does is it lets you play all of your cards, all of your units, and then you can hold a battlefield, do all that type of stuff, and then just hold open 1 energy at the end of your turn, and it stops your opponent from being able to just go Grand Stratagem, attack in for 99 power, because Bullet Time is only 1 energy. So your opponent can't do that play, because if they cast Grand Stratagem, they make all their units really big, they attack in with their whole battlefield for 99 power or 99 might. What you do then is you just go, okay, cool, it's 99 total might, but each unit is only like 6 might or 7 might or 8 might at most. So you can just go cast a Bullet Time, recycle 8 energy, board wipe you because you got greedy and attacked in with everything at the same time. Right? It's also very good into people trying to conquer. If they try and conquer with a big unit, maybe they... I don't really know. If they attack with a big unit that you want to kill, you can use Bullet Time to stop that at some point. If they try to, if you need to conquer into a really big battlefield, you can do like this really big push attack or this really big attack. Your opponent goes combat trick, combat trick, combat trick, and you say, okay, cool, 1 energy, tap Bullet Time you for 10 or something, and that's very, very good for you. But that's not also why it's good. Bullet Timing for 4 is just as good because you play multiple Bullet Times. We play 2. You don't really want to draw multiples, because if you have to use a big bullet time, your second bullet time gets a lot worse. Also, after you have to use a big bullet time, you can't really play the really big cards in your hand. If you end up drawing something like a Mind Splitter, if you have any unit in your hand at the end of it, you can effectively say you're never playing that card again. So don't be afraid to bullet time for, 4 might, 5 might, sometimes 4 or 5 energy. Set yourself down to, again, like, you're probably going to be at like 3 to 4 energy at that point. You'll immediately go to 5. You can bullet time for another 5 for another like mini wipe or something at that point if you need to. You use the bullet time, 2 bullet times, well, boom, there you go. Also, if you bullet time then down to 3, you go to 5. The next turn you can just play Mind Splitter, and it's not going to be one of those games where it's like you're never casting a card again on your turn, right? So very good, very solid card for a lot of matchups right now. Stack Deck. Stack Deck is just in here for consistency reasons. It increases your odds of finding Aurora extremely high, on top of being able to, after you have your Aurora, just dig through your deck for an answer that you need. If you need exactly that Mind Splitter, you can find it. If you need exactly a Snapvine, you can find it. If you need exactly a fight or flight push, a challenge to deal with the board, you have it. If you're trying to dig for that bullet time, is usually what it's for in the mid to end game, you'll find it. So that's why this also is a perk of playing purple that I forgot to mention with the Aurora deck. Is the main thing is without having any amount of draw. So this is going to be your stats decks and your Volibear Aurora decks where they don't really have draw on their decks. You have a 65% chance to have Aurora by turn 4. Just always have a 65% chance to have Aurora by turn 4 with 0 draw. So in over half of your games by playing Volibear and Set, you will just naturally have Aurora on turn 4. With Stack Deck and with these purple cards, I used to play more draw in purple. There's a Timelines card where it says 3 energy, 1 power, discard your hand, draw 4, or both players discard their hands and draw 4. You can just dig through so much of your deck that this is why you will effectively always have the Aurora on turn 3, whether or not you have the energy to play it, because you have the ramp spells also is like different math, but you should always have the actual Aurora card on turn 3 or by turn 4 in your hand, because your odds of drawing it with Stack Deck make it go up a lot. It's about 5%, plus 5% for every card you draw is a really easy, quick way to think of it. It's not the most accurate, but what you do is you say, okay, you start with 4 cards in your opening hand, you mulligan away 2 cards, so you see 6 cards total in your opening hand, and then you draw 1 card for turn on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. So you've seen 9 total cards by turn 3. So again, quick math tell you if you just multiply everything by 5, that gives you like 45% chance to find it by turn 3, which roughly around 50-50. That's also just not exactly maths again, right? You have a much higher chance because there are 3 ofs, but you have a 65% chance to have it by turn 4 already. So if you increase that by 3 looks, because of Stack Deck, you're not drawing 3 cards, but you are looking at 3 cards to look from, and then you're putting those on bottom. So you've sped up by 3 effectively. You could see the 4th card when you would have seen the 1st card. That is another like 15% chance, roughly around like 12% chance added to finding the Aurora by turn 4. So that already pumps you up to like a 79%, almost 80% chance to find Aurora by turn 4. If you play another Stack Deck, if you play 2 Stack Decks, I think it's roughly around like an 88% chance to have Aurora by turn 3 or turn 4. I don't remember which one. And then you play other card draws like Treasure Trove, which cycles, Confront, which draws, Pack of Wonders, Treasure Trove, which is, a draw engine, stuff like that. So it's just in here to help you find your Aurora early, and this is something that's really good about purple and this deck, is you will find your Aurora super often and always have it. Next is Gust. Gust is just in here as it says return a unit at a battlefield with 3 or less might to its owner's hand. This is a card that will single-handedly win you games. This card can effectively read 1 energy, stop your opponent from getting 2 points, and erase their turn 1, which is massive. Gust alone buys you at least 1 turn if you have it on turn 2. Because what happens is your opponent plays, a 2 energy card on turn 1. They attack in to a battlefield to try and conquer it. Normally what would happen is they would go to 1 point on turn 2. And then they will play a second unit, because they have 4 energy most likely. So they'll play another unit on turn 2. On turn 3, they will get a point for holding, and then conquer the second battlefield. And they are now at 3 points. Obviously, if you play your Aurora at this point, you only have to make up a 5-point deficit, because while they're only at 3 when you play the Aurora, there's a good chance that they get both of those hold points, so they go to 5, and they are only at 5, and you have quite a couple of turns to get back into the game, which is really easy because 5 is notably not 6. So in your normal games where you're just playing to 8, 6 is a humongous break point because 6 allows them to win the game by just conquering both battlefields in one turn, which a lot of decks can, that is a lot of times the game plan. So that's why having Aurora on 3 is amazing. If you don't, and you have Aurora on turn 4, this is where things can kind of get scary, because instead of going to 3 points, or instead of having 3 points when you play the Aurora, your opponent has 5 points from playing the Aurora now on turn 4. And whether you get you have to effectively hit a Dead Bloom or a Snapvine or something to get back into the game immediately, or you can just fall way too far behind by only having it on turn 4. And that could be rough, especially if you're not playing on Aspirant's Climb in that game. But what Gust does is, instead of letting your opponent be at effectively 5 points when you play Aurora on turn 3, or 7 points when you play your Aurora on turn 4, is your opponent goes, turn 1, play a unit. Turn 2, they go to conquer. You gust that unit to your opponent's hand. So now on turn 2, they have 4 energy. They are still at 0 points. They still probably want to play their, bigger 3 or 4 energy units. They might settle for 2 cost is the best case scenario for them, so we'll give them that. So we'll say, okay, they play 2 energy units. So now on turn 3, they double conquer. And so on turn 3, they now have 2 points. And you go, okay, sounds good. I will now play my Aurora on turn 3. You're only at 4 points, which is huge. Or you're only at 6 points, which is, again, huge when you have Aurora on turn 4. And this is, again, assuming 0 other interactions. If you don't have a bullet time you want to use early, which you shouldn't be. Some games you can, it's just really weird. But if you don't have a second gust, a bullet time, a fight or flight to prevent any future points, your opponent is going to be at 6 points if you play a turn 4 Aurora, which is not great, but still easier to deal with because they have to do more than just hold one battlefield on accident now. So you're under a lot less pressure. And that's what Gust is really good at. Of course, if you ever draw 2 Gust, it is just lights out. Or if you pair Gust with a fight or flight to, again, prevent another point, it's kind of lights out. And that's the whole purpose of Gust. It's like your anti-aggro, anti-tempo tool. And again, that is the best case scenario for your opponent, where they got their unit gusted on turn 1, and then turn 2, they happen to have two energy units that they can play to conquer. If they don't have that, if they just have the 2 energy unit to play again, or they opt to just play a 3 or 4 energy unit at that point, then they are going to be at 1 point on turn 3 and be at 3 total points on turn 3 total points after they get the hold and the conquer, stuff like that, after you get your Aurora down, and it is just completely lights out. Next, we're going to talk about Treasure Trove and Pack of Wonders. These cards kind of go together. Treasure Trove says, it's a 2 energy gear, no power. It says, when this leaves the board, draw 1 card and channel 1 rune exhausted, and then you can recycle a purple rune to tap Treasure Trove and kill it effectively. So at the floor, it is 2 energy recycle itself, because it doesn't actually cost a power, because you will recycle a purple rune and then immediately channel another rune, so you will stay at the same rune count, and then it will draw a card when it kills itself. So it's just a way to cycle to get, churn through your deck to try and find your Aurora or the cards you need. But the reason it's in this deck and it turns really big is when you pair it with Pack of Wonders, which is a 2 energy gear that says exhaust, return another friendly gear, unit, or hidden card to its owner's hand. So because Treasure Trove doesn't say when I die or when I'm killed, draw a card, channel rune, it just says when I leave the board. What you do here and what the combo is you play a Treasure Trove for 2 energy, and then you play a Pack of Wonders for 2 energy. You immediately tap the Pack of Wonders because gear come in unexhausted, they come in ready. So you tap the Pack of Wonders to bounce and return the Treasure Trove to your hand. So the Treasure Trove left the board, so then you draw a card. So now the Pack of Wonders is cycling itself, and you channel a rune exhausted. And notice we didn't have to pay a power to do this because Pack of Wonders doesn't cost anything. And you didn't have to pay the power from the Treasure Trove ability to kill itself.
So this is genuine ramp. Like this is one rune was ramped on this turn, and you drew a card closer to your Aurora or whatever it is you're trying to dig for. And that's the main combo with this. In the late stages of the game, Pack of Wonders is really great because you can use it to bounce and replay things like your Deadbloom Predator, to bounce and replay things like Snapvine, because Snapvine's very cheap, and your super duper duper grindy games. You can bounce your Soul Gorger to replay Soul Gorger and get another card out of your trash and make sure you don't run out of units. That is something you can do as well, but 99% of the time you're just going to use Pack of Wonders to continue to draw cards with Treasure Trove. It effectively just turns Treasure Trove into a 2 energy mobilize, where it's at that point in the game you're spending 2 energy to channel a rune and then also draw a card. So it's kind of just like better mobilize in those states. And then if you ever want to do both, or again if you don't draw the Pack of Wonders, you just play the Treasure Trove, you will still be able to cycle itself, and as you're able to cycle itself. Next is Confront. 2 energy, no power, action speed. Units you play this turn enter ready, draw 1 card. This card is 99% of the time going to be used as a simple 2 energy, draw 1 card. It is a 2 energy card, which notably is very good when you're choosing to go second, right? So you can stack deck on turn 1, still have 2 energy left, so if you don't hit your mobilize, don't hit a Treasure Trove, don't hit a Pack of Wonders or something like that, then you can hit a Confront. You have so many 2-cost cards that stack decking on turn 1 with 3 energy just leaves you with any 2-cost card, 2 energy card you can play at that point. So Confront lets you just draw cards, cycle, increasing the odds, again, plus 5% if you want to think of it that way, to find your Aurora early. Sometimes in the late game, the first part matters, which says units you play this turn enter ready. You know, in the super grindy games where you already have your Aurora, or maybe you're at like 9 energy or 10 energy in the late game, you can definitely do some nasty things where you go like play a Confront on 10 energy, you have 8 energy left, play a Soul Gorger, it comes in ready, the unit you Soul Gorgered now comes in readied, you do a bunch of stuff like that. On 9 energy, of course, you can Confront into Anivia, so now you just have a readied Anivia, which is really broken into a lot of matchups and people aren't expecting. But most of the time, this is just 2 energy, draw a card. That is how I use it 99% of the time. I actually like almost only look to use it that way, and then if it happens to line up in the other way where I can get the really big value late game, I'll do it. But most of the time, I just try to use it as 2 energy draw. Mobilize and Catalyst I'll cover at the same time. Both of these cards do the same thing. It is just early game ramp. So Mobilized is 2 energy, channel 1 rune exhausted if you can't draw 1, and then Mobilized is 4 energy, channel 2 runes exhausted. If you couldn't channel 2 runes this way, draw 1. The last parts of those don't matter a whole lot because our deck uses a lot of power even in the late game after ramping, that we rarely ever have all 12 runes out. So this is effectively just says, 2 energy, ramp 1, 4 energy, ramp 2. Mobilize combos really well with stack deck. Like I said, you can stack deck on turn 1. If you hit the mobilize, you immediately mobilize, and that's great. It increases your odds. You have a 45% chance to have a mobilize on turn 1 if you, again, mulligan 2 cards away, which you should be doing because you're either mulliganing 2 cards to find the Dazzling Aurora, or if you have the Dazzling Aurora, you're mulliganing away 2 cards to try and find the mobilize and gust. So if you, always are mulliganing away 2 cards, Mobilize is 45% chance to find it. Again, if we stack deck, you add 15% to that, we come up to like 60% chance to having Mobilize on turn. Went over Pack of Wonders. Next is Challenge. So I'm on 2 Challenge in the main deck. I've seen a lot of people with 1 Challenge in the main deck. I'm only on 2 Confront. I could be convinced to do 1 Challenge in the main deck and then go up to 3 Confront just to have more draw consistency. But I really like Challenge as a way to have interaction with your opponent in that mid to late game. At action speed, being able to just kill a unit is really nice oftentimes, especially when it's paired with things like the fight or flight, or when it's paired with things like a bullet time, because you can bullet time most things and then challenge the other thing that has, like 1 HP left or 2 HP, and that way you're not having to sacrifice 2 extra runes to get that big thing, or 3 extra runes to get that big thing with your bullet time, for example, and that's really nice. Obviously, the mid game is really nice if you ever have to just go like Snapvine, challenge, and blah blah blah. It's really cool. But I think I could be convinced to only play 1 because it is not a card until you already have units in play, which means you've already resolved your Aurora, or you don't have Aurora and you've already started spending energy for units, and that's not usually typically the spot you want to be in. It's a fine spot and you can play from there, but it's not where you want. So I could be convinced to go to 1.
Next is Fight or Flight. This is effectively just Gust, but worse early and better late. So Gust saves you usually 2 points because it returns the unit to their hand, so they can't just immediately attack with additional amounts of units. It punishes their development. Fight or Flight stops them from getting the same 1 point on that turn that they went to attack with, but it doesn't stop them from conquering on the next turn or getting that hold on the next turn, because all it does is just push the unit back to their base. So they just go, okay, sounds good, ready everything on my next turn, attack with it again anyways, and there wasn't really a huge tempo loss, just a very slight tempo loss. But what Fight or Flight does is in the mid to late game, it's really good into things like Darius, Fox, Dragon, all these really big meta-defining cards right now, by being a 0 energy, 1 power hidden card, or just holding up 2 energy at the same time, being able to push either your unit back so it doesn't die, or push your opponent's really big thing back so it can't kill you. Whether that really big thing is, again, like I said, a Darius coming in for 7, a Watcher coming in for 7, a Master Yi plays the 8-mana Dragon to make something come in for 10. Fight or Flight is really good in the mid to late game. And now the last thing we just have to cover are the unit selection I did for this. So 2 snaps. So these units are extremely, this is standard. This is your stock Anivia unit fleet, which is Snapvine, Anivia, this is your normal Misfortune unit suite, which is Snapvine, Anivia, Mindsplitter, Soulgorger, and Deadbloom. The only thing here that's kind of weird is I'm only on 1 Soulgorger. I was on 2 for the longest time, but the issue of flipping out a Soulgorger immediately off of your Aurora, if Soulgorger is the first thing you hit off of Dazzling Aurora, it feels really, really, really bad. And then if you draw a Soulgorger, it also feels not the greatest. But what Soulgorger is good at is in the mid game, after you ideally hit a Deadbloom Predator, it comes in, it kills some stuff, takes a point. Your opponent now has to deal with that big Deadbloom Predator. They do that, and then you go, okay, cool, Soulgorger, bring back my Deadbloom Predator, do it again, right? So you're effectively getting to play 4 Deadbloom Predators, or all 3 Snapvine in the main, or 4 Mind Splitters, which is super crazy and good enough to put in the deck. And then I'm only on 2 Snapvine, whereas most people are on 3. My issue is Snapvine is very bad into Kai'Sa. If you play a Snapvine and they already have a Watcher in play, if you flip a Snapvine off of Aurora and they have a Watcher on the battlefield, Snapvine is not a May ability, so you have to choose a unit on a battlefield to fight, and obviously their Watcher is just going to kill your Snapvine. Also, if you hit a Snapvine off of the Aurora and your opponent has 2 mana open and they just smokescreen the Snapvine, you again have kind of just lost your Aurora trigger. That's why I'm only on 2, because this card comes out into both. This card comes out against Kai'Sa, and then comes out against Victor too, because Victor just plays a bunch of small units, even though Snapvine is fine there. You have other things you want to bring in that's better. And then I'm again, the 1 Gorger. I am on 2 Anivia because I think Anivia is just too strong to not play. It wins your Ahri matchup by canceling out Ahri ability, and then it's really good into Master Yi by also canceling out the Master Yi ability. Master Yi gives his unit +2 might for defending alone. Anivia comes in and deals 3 damage automatically off of the ability, which effectively negates the Master Yi ability. You can kind of look at this as a 7 energy, 11 might attacker if it's attacking just 1 unit, and if you're attacking multiple units, it is a good way to punish your opponent for trying to hold. All those lines we talked about earlier where your opponent decides to try and hold, and you just do something that readies an Anivia or lets you play an Anivia and attack with it immediately, and your opponent wasn't accounting for that amount of math, it just goes to town, goes to work. Next is Mind Splitter. We already kind of went over this card. Rips cards out of your opponent's hand. Soulgorger, like I said, is for the mid to late game. It allows you to be on 3 Snapvine in the main anyways, 4 Deadbloom Predator in those matchups where you need it. Mind Splitters in those matchups again where you need it. And all in all, it is just nice to go, okay, end of turn Aurora, flip out a Soulgorger, oops, okay, flip out a Mind Splitter, and I just put 12 might into play at the same time. That is very impressive. And then the last card is Deadbloom Predator. This card is just Deadbloom Predator. Everyone knows this card. This card's great. 8 energy, 2 power. You may play me to an occupied enemy battlefield. So it kind of has Accelerate as well, where it comes into play off of an Aurora, and you just immediately get to take over an opponent's battlefield and challenge them at it. Or it's not a have to, so you can decide to just put it in your base.
Again, the really good thing is that it's better than Accelerate, because Accelerate units off of Aurora can't attack immediately or conquer immediately, because it is the end of your turn and you're passing. But Dead Bloom Predator, if you hit it out off of an Aurora at the end of your turn, it can still immediately be played onto that battlefield where your opponent is and conquer that unit, or conquer that battlefield immediately. Super nice. And the last thing we'll go over is the sideboard. Again, sideboard I like to go into less in detail on these videos because the sideboard changes a lot. But again, I will have a super in-depth sideboard guide on my Metafy, so go check that out for free. The sideboard guide will be completely free, and it will go over why these cards are in the sideboard more in depth, as well as other cards you could put into a sideboard, what you're looking for in a Misfortune sideboard, where your struggle areas are that you want sideboard cards in, specific matchups you want sideboard cards in, etc. But I'll just go over these quickly that I have here, because the sideboard guide will do all of that work for me, and I don't want to go over it all twice. You guys should just go check that out. First is Sabotage. Sabotage is 1 energy, 1 power. Look at your opponent's hand, choose a non-unit card from it, and they recycle that card. This is effectively just to get rid of your opponent's salvages, so they can't salvage your Aurora. Flurry of Blades is a 3 of. I think this is one of the cards you will always play in the Aurora sideboard, just because if you ever run into a deck where this is good into, that's probably a fairly bad matchup for you, so you are going to be glad you have it. This is 1 energy, 0 power, reaction speed, deal 1 to all units at battlefield. So this is mainly in there right now for the Victor matchup, because what your Victor opponent does is they will play a 1 might unit, right? And then they will attack onto a battlefield. Let's say they play 2 1 might units, whether they're going second or whatever, or they're going 3 on turn 1 because we have extra energy is what we're usually giving them. So what they're doing is they're playing a 2 energy unit, which probably has 1 might in it, or potentially has 1 might, and then they're playing a recruit token. So what Flurry of Blades lets them do is they conquer 1 battlefield, you say okay, they go to conquer the 2nd battlefield, and you cast Flurry of Blades, and that will kill both units, completely wiping them, and then not letting them get the 2nd conquer point. They don't get the hold point for the first one, so you're effectively saving 3 points total there, which is really nice. But it's also just a really nice way to board wipe early into any 1 might token type strategies. Rebuke. So I have a copy of Rebuke in here. It's fine. It could very easily just be a 3rd fighter flight. The idea is if your opponent does have a really big unit that has some sort of accelerate or some sort of cost to it, like a Mundo, a Darius, the dragoned unit. Yes, obviously bouncing a dragon is not good, but if you can bounce the unit that was pumped by dragon, Rebuke is notably not defiable because it has 2 power cost. So you just bounce back their 2 cost unit or whatever that got pumped, and now they don't get the dragon ability again, and then when they play that unit, they're not going to get a whole lot of effect from it, is like the idea behind that. It's fine. Also fine into like expensive cards and set, again, Kaisa, etc. Snapvine 1 in the sideboard, because when Snapvine is good, it is broken. It's very good in the Master Yi matchup. It's very good in the set matchup. Obviously, there are some matchups where it's unplayable and not very good, like the Kaisa matchup, the Victor matchup. But in those mid-rangey type of matchups that are trying to hold or interact with the battlefield and play decently sized units, Snapvine is amazing, so I want the 3rd copy. And then the last card is Purple Misfortune, 1 of in the sideboard, because you can change out your chosen champion in sideboard games. So I will take out the Orange Misfortune and add in a Purple Misfortune when I play against exactly Victor or any deck with Cole, because Misfortune is a card I can play if I'm going second with the extra energy battlefield out. Misfortune is a turn 1 play if you don't draw Catalyst, and she costs 1 power, which is fine because you go from an even number of runes to an odd number of runes. All right, so it doesn't mess up your Aurora math often. And then she just sits in the back. You don't really play her to a battlefield. You don't put her in any danger. You simply put the Misfortune in the back of your base, and it is your Cole protection. It makes it so your opponent cannot play Cole and get a lot of value out of it, because if they do cast Cole, you will simply just sacrifice your 4 energy Misfortune and not your, big 7 or 8 energy unit you got off of the Dazzling Aurora. So that's why she's in the sideboard, because I think she is still really needed in that Victor matchup, and I like the fact that you can change out champions, so it works out really well. You don't mess up your Aurora odds, the units you're flipping out, anything like that, by adding in a cold target. Whereas all your other options for that is like put in a cheap unit in your deck, so that way if you draw it and play it on turn 1, sure, you can't get cold, but the issue with that is you're going to play a Aurora, and then like 2 turns later, you're going to flip out a 2 might Poro and just be sad that you didn't flip out like a Dead Bloom or
any other big unit at that point, right? So that is the entire in-depth deck guide. We're right at an hour and 10 minutes. Like I said, super in-depth. The TLDR for this deck, for everyone that just skipped to the end here, the TLDR is, one, go check out my Metafy, because I will have a sideboard guide, a complete sideboard guide for free on my Metafy, just like I did with Darius Hook. It is going to be free, and it goes super in-depth in the sideboard, as well as all of your sideboard options, what you look for in sideboard, all that type of stuff for Misfortune, so go check that out. And then the TLDR on how to play the deck is, you are a Dazzling Aurora deck where this gear plays the unit on top of your deck for free. So you will reveal cards off the top of your deck until you see a unit, you put it in for free. We only play big expensive units that have really good effects. So you are effectively getting a free 7 energy or 8 energy unit every single turn for free, which is really nice. You play early game cards like Gust and Fight or Flight to prevent your opponent from getting points early, and then you have your ramp cards and Mobilize and Catalyst to get to your Dazzling Aurora really quickly, or be able to play it really quickly. So you can play Dazzling Aurora on turn 3 extremely often. That's very common to play Aurora on turn 3. And then we have tools like Stack Deck, Confront, and then the Treasure Trove Pack of Wonders combo. All of these cards are just in here to help you draw into your Aurora more consistently. So the odds of you drawing an Aurora by turn 4 are somewhere around like 88% if you end up drawing a Stack Deck, a Confront, and a Treasure Trove, or 2 Stack Decks. You have like close to a 90% chance of having an Aurora by turn 4. So your odds of hitting the Aurora are insanely high. Even by turn 3, very, very high. So you're a go second deck where you always choose to go second, because starting on 3 energy lets you be on an odd rune count. So you go from 3 energy to 5 to 7 to 9 on turn 4. Or if you catalyst, you just go from 5 energy to 7 to 9, and you can Aurora on turn 3 because it speds you up an entire turn, right? So that's this entire complete in-depth deck tech for all of you guys. Hope you enjoy it. Again, go check out the Metafy for all of the cool stuff coming that way. The scrim reviews, like raw scrim reviews, so you can see what it's like to be in a high-level scrim environment, to see what we talk about, how we play, take any notes like that. Go check. That's going to be on there. Obviously, the coaching deck guides. I'm going to be doing a bunch of meta reviews and tournament prep, tournament reviews, all that type of stuff when big tournaments are happening, like when the first regional happens for Riftbound. I'm going to be hosting a live stream just on Metafy where I'm essentially going over the meta expect. I will tell you guys the exact deck list and deck I'm bringing, so you will have all that insider information, and really just set yourself up to be the most successful you can be in Riftbound, and set yourself up for whatever your goal is wanting to be. This is the best way to kind of get there. This is the #1 channel for competitive Riftbound content right now. So appreciate your guys' time. Hope you guys enjoy the content. I'll see you in the next video.